Wow, this mystic palace you shared, huh? What a story. Haunted house, city's terrified, and a hero who may be in over his head.
At first glance, it seems like your classic good versus evil, right?
Yep.
But the way Ranganathan uses the haunted house,
Yeah.
it's like a metaphor, deeper meaning. Like he's saying the scariest monsters, they aren't the ones we see. More like what's hiding in our own minds.
That's a great point. And speaking of hiding, one thing that creeped me out, the victims, they're turned into these like ghostly figures.
Yeah.
It's like they lose themselves.
Oh,
Have you
absolutely.
ever felt that way? Like something's eating away at who you are?
Totally. I think everyone's been there at some point, right?
Right.
That feeling of losing yourself. Maybe it's a bad relationship or a job that just sucks the life out of you. Even just, everyday life, the pressure.
Yeah.
And that's what's so scary about what happens in the Mystic Palace. They're not just trapped, physically, but it's like their minds are being broken down too.
It's like that demon king. What's his name?
Shashika.
Right, Shashikant. He's taking away their individuality.
Yeah.
They can't think for themselves.
Like puppets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got Anil, our hero, bursting onto the scene, ready to fight. And I admire that, the courage. But I wonder, did he really get what he was up against? It's easy to charge in when you think you know the enemy.
Right.
But what happens when it's something sneakier, something that feeds on your fears, makes you doubt yourself?
Good question. Anil is brave, no doubt, but is bravery enough, He
Yeah.
thinks it's a straight fight, but what if winning takes more than just being strong?
Right.
What if it means facing the darkness inside yourself, too, not just in the haunted house?
I see what you mean. Sometimes we're so busy with the outside battles, we forget the ones inside us.
Yeah.
Like if we can just beat the obvious bad guy, everything will be fine. What if the real fight is within?
And Ranganathan gives us this character who seems to get that, Dr. Manipal. He's not a fighter, but he's trying to figure out the why, like what's causing all this horror.
He's like the voice of reason, saying, hey, slow down. Think about what we're really dealing with here.
Exactly.
But even he seems to be struggling with the fact that maybe, just maybe, things are way more complicated than anyone realizes.
Absolutely. He's starting to feel it.
Yeah.
Something's off. Even after they beat Shashikant, little clues, bad feelings, like the victory won't last.
Classic horror movie stuff, right?
Yeah.
Everything seems fine, peaceful. But then there's this feeling like something awful's about to happen. And that's where Dr. Manipal, with his intuition, comes in. He's tuned in to those little signs of danger, the whispers,
Right.
the ones everyone else ignores.
Right.
What do you think about his unease? Is he just being paranoid, or is he onto something real?
That's the big question, isn't it? Is Dr. Manipal just being careful, or is his gut feeling leading him to something much worse than anyone imagined?
And then that moment when he hears those whispers at the haunted house, it's chilling. It's like the shadows themselves are talking to him, warning him. The danger isn't over. What do those whispers mean, do you think? Are they like the ghosts of Shashikant's victims, or something even more sinister?
I think they represent like the trauma that's still there, the pain it hasn't been dealt with. Even when you defeat a tyrant,
Right.
the damage they did, it stays.
It's like you cut off the head of the snake, but the poison's still spreading.
Exactly. That's what Anil and Dr. Manipal are up against now. They beat Shashikant, but they didn't deal with what allowed him to become powerful in the first place.
So it's not about just strength anymore.
No.
It's about understanding the deeper stuff,
Yeah.
the scars left behind, the mental and emotional ones. This is where things get really interesting. We're going beyond just the physical.
Absolutely. It's psychological,
Yeah.
spiritual even.
And that's what makes this story so gripping. It's not just good versus evil, simple as that. It makes you think about trauma, oppression, and how powerful fear can be. And it leaves us with so many questions. How do you fight something like fear, despair? Can you even use weapons against that? What happens when the hero realizes the fight's not over? That the victory they thought they had was just the start of something much bigger and much harder.
Those are the questions we'll be looking at as we continue our deep dive into the Mystic Palace.
Stay tuned, because it's about to get intense.
We left off with Anil and Dr. Manipal, right? That feeling that something's lurking beneath the surface, even though everything seems okay in Winterfell, like when you solve a problem, but you still feel like something's not quite right. You ever get that?
Oh, all the time.
Okay.
It's like you clean the whole house, you think you got everything, but then you find another dust bunny in some weird spot. Like, ugh, are things ever really clean in here? The dust bunnies, it's those whispers of the trapped spirits. And Dr. Manipal's feeling like, something bad's coming.
Yeah, it's like Ranathan is building this tension on purpose, right?
Right.
The house, it's not just a creepy place anymore. It's like all of Winterfell's fears, they're tied to it, even though they think they got rid of Shashikanth.
So the house, it's like a reminder that something's off. Like that dust bunny you can't get rid of. Makes you wonder, what would it be like to actually walk through that house, knowing something could be like hiding around every corner?
Well, that's exactly what Anil and Dr. Manipal do, right? They go back in.
Yeah.
Right to Shashikanth's chamber. And the atmosphere, it's almost too much.
Ooh, I'm getting nervous just thinking about it. What happens?
It's not dust bunnies they find, but it's pretty chilling. Remember those whispers Dr. Manipal kept hearing?
Yeah.
They come back. Louder this time. The whole room, it's like it's filled with these voices, trapped spirits, all crying out.
Oh, wow. It's like Shashikanth's evil. It's soaked into everything, even the walls, like a stain on their souls. You know, it makes you think, beating the bad guys, sometimes it's not enough.
Right.
It's like after a disaster, a storm or something, you clean up the mess, but the damage is still there.
That's a good way to put it. And it shows how this story, it's not just about good versus evil anymore. It's deeper than that. It's about, like, the scars left behind from oppression, from trauma, and how fear can stick around even when the cause is gone.
So just getting rid of the villain, it's not the whole solution. They have to, like, heal these wounds that you can't even see. But how do you even fight something like that? You can't punch fear.
Exactly. That's what Anil and Dr. Manipal are facing now. They realize they only won on the surface. They went after the guy in charge, but they didn't deal with the real problem, the despair, the suffering. That's what gave Shashikanth power in the first place. It's like you take medicine for a headache, but you don't figure out why you have the headache.
So they need to go deeper, understand the root cause, not just use force. Makes me think, how do we deal with problems in our own lives? Do we just fix the obvious stuff? Or do we actually try to figure out what's really going on?
That's a good question for all of us, I think. It's easy to just react to the crisis, the enemy you can see. But sometimes the most important fight is within us or within our communities.
Now, this is where the story gets really interesting. It's not just the physical stuff anymore.
Yeah.
It's more like psychological, spiritual even.
Absolutely.
It's like a battle for the soul of Winterfell. But how do Anil and Dr. Manipal even start to fight this new enemy, the one you can't even see?
That's what we'll talk about in the last part of our deep dive. But I'll tell you this, it's going to take more than just strength and bravery. They need something deeper, something to help them face not just the darkness outside, but the darkness inside too.
Ooh, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
This is like that moment in a movie when everything changes and you're like, wait, what's going to happen next?
Don't go anywhere, listeners, because we're going into the final part of the Mystic Palace. And I have a feeling it's going to be a wild ride.
All right, we're back, and things are getting intense at that haunted house. We left off with Anil and Dr. Manipal realizing their work isn't over.
Right.
Shashikanth's gone, but the darkness, it's still there. It's like when you think you're over a cold, and bam, it hits you again, even worse.
What's interesting now is it makes you think about what winning really means, you know? We like stories where good beats evil. Simple as that.
Yeah.
But here, Ranganathan's saying it takes more than just beating the bad guy. It's about healing, fixing things, facing those shadows that stick around.
Like putting a Band-Aid on a wound doesn't mean it's actually healed.
Right.
You got to deal with what's underneath. So how do they fight something like fear and despair? It's not like you can just, I don't know, hit it with a stick or something.
Right. You need a different approach. And Ranganathan doesn't give us all the answers, but there are hints. Think about Dr. Manipal. He's a psychologist.
Yeah.
Maybe he tries to understand the trauma of those trapped spirits, help them deal with the pain, find peace so they can finally be free.
Wow. So he's like a doctor for the living and the dead. That's a lot to take on.
Absolutely. And then you have Anil with his courage and all that.
Right.
Maybe he focuses on bringing hope back to Winterfell, doing good deeds, helping the community, you know, reminding people that there's still good in the world.
So they're each tackling a different side of the problem. Dr. Manipal's with the mental and emotional stuff, and Anil's rebuilding the community, like a two-pronged attack on the darkness.
And that's what makes the ending so powerful. It's saying that fighting darkness, it's not a one-person job. It takes people working together, understanding each other, and being willing to face those shadows, both inside and out.
That really hits home, especially these days. You know, all the news, conflict, everything feels so divided. It's easy to lose hope. But the Mystic Palace, it's like a reminder, even when it's dark, there's still light somewhere.
And that light, it can come from anywhere. From brave people like Anil, from compassionate people like Dr. Manipal, from small acts of kindness. And just believing that even when things are tough, we can get through it.
This story, it's taken us on quite a ride. We started with a haunted house, a mysterious bad guy, a classic fight. But we ended up somewhere much deeper. We talked about trauma, how powerful fear is, and how important it is to face the darkness, both inside us and around us.
And in the end, I think that's what Ranganathan wants us to remember. Winning isn't always about beating someone. Sometimes it's about facing our own demons, healing ourselves, and having the courage to believe that after the darkest night, the sun will rise again.
So listeners, as you finish the Mystic Palace and go back to your lives, think about the shadows, the ones inside you and the ones in your community. What can you do to face them? What light can you bring into the world? Remember, even the smallest act of kindness or bravery can make a difference. And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.